You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Of course, the giant story that everybody's talking about, Maason Smith, is suspended. He will not play against Florida State. Listen, there's no denying Maason Smith's impact. Like Brian Kelly in the spring talked about the impact that Maason Smith has on LSU's pass rush. Like, it's just undeniable.
Look, I mean, we had great edge presence last year, right? It was pretty obvious with Harold and VJ. But you could fan one side and chip or move the back to the other because we didn't have a great inside pass rush presence. Now you put Maason to the inside. If you do that this year, I don't know how many sacks he'll have. You can't single block him. We couldn't. So when you start to fan to him, and when I say fan, when you start to move the center to him or use a back inside, now you're going to leave our edge players one-on-one, and we'll have a really good balanced pass rush. So he brings that presence, which we didn't have last year.
I remember when Dave Aranda was at LSU and he talked about Arden Key, the phrase he used was he changes the math. Now, Dave is a really smart guy, but it's essentially a shorter, more concise way of saying what Brian Kelly just did. When Maason Smith is there, you can't fan out to respect Harold Perkins. You got to contain Maason Smith, which is going to create more opportunities on the outside for your pass rush. Well, you remove Maason Smith from the equation now, and it changes things. For LSU, the really good news, if you want to look at the silver lining and how this might transpire, it's the fact that when Maason Smith was out a year ago, you really had a three-man defensive line rotation. You used Jaquelin Roy, Jacobian Guillory, and Mekhi Wingo. Like, that was it. I mean, three dudes played the whole season. I remember asking Mekhi Wingo at SEC Football Media Days about that specifically. Like, how did you get prepared to play every single down? And I don't think we have it, but his answer that he gave was effectively, you just condition yourself and prepare yourself mentally to do it. And so those guys did that and were able to take advantage of those reps. When Brian Kelly was addressing that, he said as much back in the spring about the guys on the defensive line who benefited from Mason's absence a year ago, which got so many guys reps.
Jacoby and Gilroy, his ability to really develop during the spring because he got so many reps playing the 1 and the 3. I think he was definitely a beneficiary. Parashand stands out to me as somebody that I don't know that he necessarily wouldn't have got the reps because we needed to find out about him, but he got so many reps that you could see his progress and his grit kind of grow during the spring to the point where, that was a really good spring for him. So I think some of those inside defensive linemen, and then I would say finally Quincy Wiggins getting a lot of work and really showing consistency day in and day out.
So he mentioned Guillory, Jacobian Guillory, and then he mentioned Parashand and Quincy Wiggins. So the interesting thing about Guillory, and I co-sign there, I think that's probably the biggest one. Jacobian Guillory, we know Mekhi Wingo is going to be on the inside. And, very just sort of candidly, I've had conversations with Power 5 coaches that have told me, with the utmost respect to Maason Smith, Mekhi Wingo is just lost because of how dominant he is. Like, his ability to his strength and power and his ability to just bull rush from the interior is so difficult to contain. So Mekhi Wingo, I think we all know, for the purpose of this conversation, how good he is. I mean, out of nowhere, that was just sort of the diminutive Missouri transfer who had to play because Maason Smith got injured and went and had himself an All-American season. So I think Wingo, we understand what he is. Guillory kind of is the big one, as Brian Kelly said there. Jacobian Guillory is now in his 4th year at LSU. And that's one of the examples that we often give when we talk about how different a guy is as an 18-year-old and as a 22-year-old. Just think about yourself physically, emotionally, from a maturity standpoint, what you were as an 18-year-old and what you were as a 22-year-old. That's where Jacobian Guillory is now. They list him at 6'2", 320. I think he's bigger than 320 just when you see him out there. They call him Tank. I mean, he's a giant space eater on the interior. He redshirted his first year, and now he's in his fourth year in the program, and he's played in 26 career games. So you've got the super strong, bull rush, active guy in Mekhi Wingo. You've got the fourth-year guy in Jacobian Guillory who's played in 26 career games. You heard Brian Kelly mention Paris Shand there. Now, Shand's an interesting one because he played defensive tackle at Arizona. He did play the interior at Arizona. This fall, though, we have seen LSU play Paris Shand. They list Paris Shand at 6'5", 280. But they're playing Paris Shand behind Savion Jones at that big end, the spot where Ali Gay played a year ago. So remember, you got your interior tackles, you've got your defensive end on the left side, and you got your jack linebacker on the right. So Shand isn't playing on the inside. He's playing on the outside. But, and this is another guy who's played in 24 career games. He's got 5 career sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. A guy who maybe hasn't stuffed the stat sheet, but played 3. Now he's in his 4th year. Again, so Guillory's a 4th-year guy. Paris Shand is a 4th-year guy. So you get veteran dudes up there. Wingo's in his 3rd year. And so you're looking at size and depth. And one of the things a year ago that if I had to say what I felt was maybe the single most impressive thing we saw Matt House do was how the circumstance forced him to get creative with his roster. When you didn't have Maason Smith, you were down to 3 interior defensive linemen. You knew Harold Perkins had to get on the field, but he was playing the jack spot, and that's where B.J. Ojulari was playing. So you had to find a way to get both those guys on the field at the same time. Matt House had to get super creative, and one of the most incredible things we saw from him a year ago was his ability to find a way to mix and match and give odd looks and shift at the line and stunt to get all those guys on the field and be effective. So maybe what it comes down to is a situation where you do have a guy like Savion Jones maybe kick in and Paris Shand goes to the end. And so you're maybe not as big, but you're more athletic on the line. Like, he'll have options to mix and match on that defensive line. And I think that is something that is very encouraging. The other guy I'll tell you, and I'll circle him, is Jordan Jefferson. Jordan, it's still funny to say Jordan Jefferson, so forgive me for chuckling a little bit. But Jordan Jefferson is a guy who transferred in from West Virginia. He's 6'4", 317. And for everything we have been able to see in camp, they have been running Smith and Wingo as their first 2. And the next 2 have been Guillory and Jordan Jefferson. So when they're like base 4-3 looks, obviously with a jack linebacker on the outside, but they're 2 interior tackles, Maason Smith and Mekhi Wingo are your starters. And next were Guillory and Jordan Jefferson. So if you're going to go Mekhi Wingo and Guillory as your starters, Jordan Jefferson is the next guy up. And again, a dude that has played a ton of Power 5 football. He is a 5th-year player. He's played 4 seasons at West Virginia. He's played in 42 career games. You're talking about a dude that's now 23 years old who has just seen a ton of Power 5 football. He's not going to be overwhelmed by going down to Orlando and getting real reps against Florida State. So not only, I'm kind of recycling a conversation, a talking point that we had about this when LSU was putting this recruiting class together, but it wasn't just about getting bodies on the inside of that defensive line to supplement. It was about getting experience as well. LSU could have gone out and signed 6 freshman defensive tackles if they wanted to, but you'd have had a bunch of young pups out there. Instead, you went and got Jordan Jefferson in his 5th year. You got Jalen Lee to come in from Florida. You got Paris Shand, who's in his 4th year. You went and got a bunch of dudes who have a lot of college experience. So it's not like they're coming in green and trying to learn how to play at this level. You can bring the young guys like Bryce Langston, like Tyge Hill, like Fitzgerald West. You can bring those young guys up behind these really veteran dudes who have played a ton and now give you a veteran rotation. Listen, that's something when Matt House in fall camp met with reporters a few weeks back, and Matt House talked about the importance of that experience that these defensive line transfers bring in.
Been pleased at the buy-in there. 2, I've been pleased with the competition and depth it's brought. Excited about, Jordan. We didn't get a chance to see him in the spring. He's done a nice job. Paris has done a nice job. Jalen Lee has gotten a lot better over the course of the summer. So I would tell you that they bring competition and depth.
So, listen, I'm not going to BS you. There's nobody on this roster that replaces Maason Smith. Nobody. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Maason Smith individually is a better option than all those guys trying to rotate and make up for his production. But sans the whole, you're grateful to have the sum of the parts, which is what LSU has in this game, and that should serve them well against Florida State. It's a real tall task. One of the issues that LSU had a year ago in this game was containing Daniels. And, was containing Jordan Travis, In containing Jordan Travis, especially on 3rd down. And Tigers just couldn't get off the field in that game last year. So it is just, I think, imperative for that defensive line and that front 7 as a whole to really impact the game. Because I think we all readily understand LSU's secondary is its weakness right now. Until proven otherwise, they have certainly more experience, more depth, more talent in that front 7, and they're going to have to impact this game to support that secondary. So, can they do it? Well, they'll have to without Maason Smith. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.